Glad that you're here. I hope your 2018 is off to a good start. It's week number 1, January 7th, right? So we're just a week in. And I hope all your New Year's resolutions have survived the first week. How many of you make New Year's resolutions? You do that? Yeah, a few of you. Okay, all right, that's good. Well, the practice of New Year's resolutions is interesting. I found out this week. It actually goes back 4,000 years. Back to the ancient Babylonians. Now, they wouldn't have called it that, right? But this idea of like making promises in the new year to make ourselves better and all of that, that started way back when. So we've been at this resolution thing for a long time. And so some of you have made some resolutions, and I applaud you. I'm happy for you. While some of us are trying to keep those resolutions that we've made, others of us are just almost ready to get around to making them. Right? I mean, we're almost there. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow, but we're almost there. And there's still others of us have chosen to take the safe route and just not do any resolutions at all, right? Because if you don't make any, you don't break any, right? You don't make them. That's the safe route. You don't have to worry about keeping them, especially when you consider that 8% of us who make New Year's resolutions actually keep them. So 8 out of 100, or basically about 1 out of 12 of us here this morning who made New Year's resolutions will keep those, if we made it. And so if that statistic is true, then your New Year's resolution list might look like this one here that started back in 2013 and has been crossed out because they didn't get it done in 2013, so they just said, well, I'm just going to use the same list for 2014, which is red, so it's like lose weight again, lose more weight, so it's just like editing the same list, get fit next year. That's like the realistic year. And what I love is number 4, it's my favorite, is when he says in 2013, stand up to the boss. And then in 2015, he's finding a job, didn't really, that's probably the only one he followed through on, and it didn't go too well. And so that your list might look like that. Or maybe you can relate with this e-card when it comes to your resolutions. Is that I can't believe it's been a year since I didn't become a better person. Man, it's already come back around again. I've got to do this again. Well, maybe you forgot. Maybe you've just given up on the idea of resolutions altogether. And so like this lady right here who said, this is a list of all of my New Year's resolutions that I actually think can happen. So she's like not very positive on the whole thing, right? But some of you are still fighting the good fight, really, with your resolutions. And you can probably relate with this next lady who's working hard, and you know how hard it is to go after your goals. And so, her goal was to lose 10 pounds this year. Only 15 to go. I love that. Oh, man. This is just hitting way too close to home, though. That's the only problem. But we all have our different motivations, all of our different reasons for making resolutions. Of course, some are more embarrassing than others, like this guy here. He said, my New Year's resolution is to lose just enough weight so that my gut doesn't jiggle when I brush my teeth. That's some high goals right there, right? I just need to stop the jiggle, okay? That's all I need to do. And so I hope you can at least accomplish that this year. But as someone with OCD tendencies like myself, this is my favorite resolution. My New Year's resolution is to overcome my OCD. My New Year's resolution is to overcome my OCD. My New Year's resolution is to overcome my OCD. Which is awesome because you have to just say it again, right? You didn't say it right the first time. Just keep saying it over. Okay. Anyways, if you don't have OCD, you don't understand. So whatever. But for you realists out there, maybe your resolution looks like this one right here. And that is, my resolution is to stop hanging out with people who ask me about my New Year's resolutions. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Stop asking me about it. But the reason why these are funny to us is because we can all relate to making a resolution and not keeping it, right? Not making it. We all know what it means to set a goal and then not reach it. To try to lose that 10 pounds only to have to update that goal a little bit later to 15 pounds, right? We understand that. We can relate to that. And many of us can relate to this picture as well when it comes to the new year. This is me And there's 2017. Some of us took a beating in 2017. And then if you look in the background, there's 2018, ready to tag in, right? Like, it's his turn next. Here's the new year coming. And I don't know why. I just think that's so funny. But, man, I laughed so hard when I saw that because I guess the reason we laugh is to keep from crying sometimes, right? And but if that's you, maybe your resolution is just to simply survive 2018. And hopefully things are looking up. But facing the new year is not just about making goals. It's not about just creating resolutions or joining the gym. Last week we talked about the importance of looking back when we face the new year, to look back over the past year. But that's also the part that we want to skip, right? Because that's not the fun part, to look back. We don't really care to do that, to evaluate how this past year has gone. We want to forget the past year, many of us, and just move on, right? Let's just keep moving. And probably the biggest reason for this is regret. It's regret. We look back, and many, if not all of us, see regrets. And hopefully we notice the good parts of 2017 too, right? But what do we do with those regrets that we see? When we look back and we see those regrets and we feel those regrets, what do we do with those? And for some of us, maybe our biggest regrets didn't happen this past year. Maybe they go further back than that. Maybe it's a few years ago or even decades ago for you. But no matter when they occurred, what do we do with our regrets? I think all of us have some regrets, right? I mean, some of them are big, some of them are small. But if we pause long enough to reflect on it, I think we've all got them. I think we all have some. And so we're going to talk about these regrets and what we can do to live beyond those regrets in this series called Starting Over that we're kicking off today. And so I'm indebted to the writing of John and Dave Ferguson and their book by the same name, Starting Over. And there's some of the things I'll be able to share from their book with you guys as we go through this. But we want to look and see how we can live beyond these regrets and know what to do with them. What do we do with those? And so as I was working on this message, I know this topic of regret can be kind of a heavy one, right? Like sometimes it's not very fun. And so I wanted to start kind of lighthearted, maybe a funny regret story of my own, just to break the ice a little bit. And so I was having a hard time thinking of something. And so I texted Katie and my wife, and I said, I need a funny regret story. Can you think of it? Of course, she texts back right, immediately. She's like, well, don't you remember that? But so within seconds, she responded. The first one off the bat was puppy chow over the holidays. Now, how many of you are familiar with this dessert, puppy chow? It's not dog food. Oh, man, you guys are not living. You are not living until you've had puppy chow. It's one of those desserts that you can just eat yourself sick off of. It's so addictive, and they're just like little munchies, that you eat. And so this Christmas, man, we went on a puppy chow tear. I mean, we were inviting people over to the house just as an excuse to make some more. Like, oh, we need to make some more. Oh, we made too much. Oh, man, I hate that, But man, that's one of our smaller regrets from 2017 is kind of overdosing on the puppy chow. And now the scale reflects that. And we're having to pick up the pieces with that. But I was thinking about some other regret stories and things I've regretted in the past. And I remembered something that happened between Katie and me when we first started dating a long time ago. And most of you know Katie's a hairstylist. And so as her boyfriend back then, that meant she also was my hairstylist, and she still is. And back in the day, this is so embarrassing, but back in the day, I used to highlight my hair. You guys remember this? You put the blonde streaks in your hair, and you had to put the cap on, and they pulled the hair through. Well, it was kind of cool back in the day. It's definitely not anymore, but that's what I used to do. And so you would put this cap with the holes in it on your head. And so Katie would have to take this little hook tool, and she'd have to poke it through the cap, hook the hair, pull it back through in order to put the bleach on it, right, to highlight it. And so, like any good hairstylist, Katie would try to be careful, like not to poke me too hard in the head with that tool as she's pulling my hair through it. And she tried to be real gentle. And if she wasn't careful, she might poke my head too hard. And man, that hurt. If you've ever had this done, it hurts. I mean, that is a sharp little tool. And so she was always very careful to be gentle. Well, my first regret, looking back on all this, is that I highlighted my hair. I mean, first of all, that's just embarrassing. I can't believe I'm sharing this. But the bigger regret was when I broke up with Katie for a little while. And soon after our breakup, I still went to her to highlight my hair, not thinking about that sharp little tool that Katie would be using to highlight my hair. So let's just say she didn't have quite the same motivation to be as gentle with that sharp little tool as she did before. So one word, regret. Regret. And I'm sure that I deserved every bit of pain that I felt that day. But now, listen, those are a couple safe examples of regret, right? Funny things that we can look back on that we regret. But there's also regrets that we can't laugh at, right? It's either too soon or maybe it's too painful. And there's a website called secretregrets.com where people publicly post regrets that they would never say out loud or maybe even never tell anyone else. But they post it on this site. And so here's a few that I found on this website, Secret Regrets, and it says this one, I regret cheating on my wife. I've stopped seeing the other woman, but am now consumed with regret and a fear that the affair will come out, which would devastate my wife and do permanent harm to my relationship with her and my kids, friends, and family. That was pretty heavy. Here's another regret that was just posted January 2nd of this year. I regret not getting help for my anger issues before marrying you. I regret this because I never had a chance to be the man that you deserved. And when you told me that you could no longer be with me, I woke up and sought help. But it's too late, and we're listing the house and separating. Another one, posted on New Year's Day, actually. It says, I hate the holiday season. The reason for the season is great, but I hate the commercialization of it. It makes me depressed since I have to spend money that I honestly don't have. It's expected of me regardless of my financial situation, and so I never look forward to it. I look forward to when it's over. But even the upcoming New Year's depressing me. Why? Because I'm stuck in the same job that barely pays enough to cover my bills. And so my biggest regret is the fact that I didn't work hard enough to get the good job with financial stability. I hope to experience true joy one holiday season. As you read through some of these stories on this website, some of it is just gut-wrenching. The regrets that some of us are walking around with. And we all have regrets, some of them big, some of them small. And every regret is unique. And the sorrow that we feel in response to our regrets is a deep and personal one to us. But I think you can put your regrets into 3 categories. See if you can place your regrets in one of these. And the first category is the regrets of our action. Regrets of action. They consist of all those things that make us kind of smack ourselves in the forehead like, why did I do that? Like, I wish I'd have never done that. Things like the lies that we've told or relationships that we've destroyed or given up on, maybe dumb choices that we've made, rage and anger that we've unleashed on someone, money that we've blown, addictions that we've fed. These are all regrets of action. And there's things that I've said and instantly wish I could shove them back in my mouth, right? Or put my foot in my mouth before they come out. Like you wish that. But there's other times that it takes me longer to realize the mistakes I've made. Sometimes I don't know it in the moment. So these regrets of action, probably the most common for regrets, right? We do something and we regret that we did it. Well, the second category of regrets for us is that there are regrets of inaction. The Book of Common Prayer has a prayer in there like that says this. It says, "Most merciful God, we confess that we have sinned against you in thought, word, and deed by what we have done and by what we have left undone." What we have done, that's action. What we have left undone, that's the inaction. The things we haven't done. Regrettable inactions or things that we didn't do, like maybe opportunities that we've missed, time that we've wasted, or risks that we didn't take, love that we left unexpressed, words that we wish we had spoken but didn't, forgiveness maybe that we withheld from someone. And so researchers say that in the short term, people tend to regret their actions the most, but in the long term, we're more likely to regret our inaction the most. Maud Muller, for those of you who are into poems and poetry and English, you may remember this poem. It's a famous poem from the 1800s by John Greenleaf Whittier. But it's about this beautiful maid named Maud Muller. And this poem contains this well-known quote, maybe you've heard it, where he says, For of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these, it might have been. That's that regret of inaction. I wish I had done that. So most of us, when we evaluate our regrets, we usually think of those regrets of action or inaction. But we can't stop there, because there's sometimes that our greatest regrets start with something hurtful that happened to us. They were done to us. These are our regrets of reaction. Regrets like that accident I was in, or the illness that I got, or the abuse that I took, how neglected I was, the rejection I felt, the betrayal that I experienced. And so when bad things happen to us, quite naturally, we regret those, right? We wish that they had never happened. And sometimes these regrets of reaction are the ones that hurt the most. Regret creates something that psychologists call the sorry cycle. And so we're going to talk about the sorry cycle a lot in this series. And so I want to introduce it to you this morning, but this sorry cycle, and it's very easy to get stuck in this sorry cycle. It's a cycle where we feel sorry about what we did, sorry about what happened, and sorry about what happened to us maybe. Whether it's something from last week, last year, decades ago, you long to make things right. You want to make things right, to change direction, to begin again. Yet somehow your attempts to fulfill all of that elude you. For whatever reason, you just can't move on. And so we call this constant back and forth between longing and regret the sorry cycle. And it's a pattern that many people live with every day. Maybe you can relate with it. We go from longing to regret, back to longing, and then back to regret, and then even more regret. Whether it's a regret of action or inaction or reaction, whatever kind it is, we get stuck in this cycle, and it's like we can't get out of it. One psychologist explained it this way, and she said, regret can have damaging effects on mind and body. When regret turns into rumination or just going over it and over it and over it in our minds, and self-blame, it keeps us from fully engaging in life. It just makes us kind of disengage. So as we move forward in this series, I just want to ask, what regrets did you bring with you today? What regrets did you bring into this room today and that you carry around with you? Are they regrets of action? Regrets of inaction? Or is it a regret maybe of reaction to something that happened to you? We want to make sure in this series that we don't get stuck. We don't want to get stuck in this cycle. And that's why I'm so excited about this series, because I see us get stuck in these cycles. And God doesn't want us to stay there. So whether if it's action, inaction, reaction, we all have regrets. And together we're going to learn how to break out of the sorry cycle. Not only break out of it, but to learn to actually love your regrets. And so over the next 5 weeks, we're going to learn together how to recognize specific regrets. And Pastor Hannah will be doing this next week. She's going to speak and tackle that topic of recognizing your regrets. We're going to talk about how to release regrets to God. And then finally, to learn to see regret as an opportunity to start over. And that's why we want to do this at the beginning of a new year of 2018. It's because some of us need to start over, and we can. And so my hope and prayer is that we will all come to see that God is big enough. God is big enough to redeem these regrets that we carry, even our worst ones. And He can use all of these things in our lives for our good. We can all start over and live a life beyond regret. So if you've been caught up in this sorry cycle, hang in there. Come. Hang in there. There's hope. All right? Well, one of the people in the Bible who learned this was Peter. He was one of Jesus' closest friends. You probably know the story. We're going to look at 2 scenes from Peter's life. You've probably heard of both of these scenes before. But you're going to see how Jesus helped Peter start over in his life. And so scene number 1 is found in Luke chapter 22. And in this scene, Jesus has just been arrested. Right? He's been arrested and dragged before the religious leaders, and his hands and feet are bound up in chains. The mood is tense. You know, you could cut the tension with a knife, and everybody knows that violence is coming, one way or the other. And so Peter's standing by this charcoal fire. You may remember the story. He's trying to keep warm by the fire, and he's standing there. And there's some military guards with him and some other bystanders who are kind of just watching everything. And so just a few hours before this, Peter had been boasting about, Jesus, I will follow you to the grave if it comes down to that. I will give you my life. I will be there for you. I will never desert you. But now as he's warming himself and he's smelling the smoke of this fire, he's gathered around this charcoal fire, he's anxious, he's nervous, and he's watching everything from a distance to kind of see what happens next. And he's trying to blend in. He's not trying to be seen or noticed. And then suddenly someone remembers who he is and speaks directly to him and says, aren't you one of Jesus' followers? And then a second and a third time they chime in saying, you must be one of them. And so we pick up the story here in Luke 22. It says, so they arrested him and led him to the high priest's home, and Peter followed at a distance. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. Servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. And finally she said, this man was one of Jesus' followers. But Peter denied it, and he said, woman, I don't even know him. So much for his promises earlier. After a while, someone else looked at him and said, you must be one of them. No, man, I'm not. About an hour later, someone else insisted, this must be one of them because he's a Galilean too. And Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. At that moment, the Lord, Jesus, turned and looked at Peter. And suddenly the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny me 3 times that you even know me. And Peter left the courtyard, weeping bitterly. So right beside of this charcoal fire, Peter instantly feels those flames of regret. He can't believe what he had just done. After everything that Jesus had done for him, he's abandoned his friend in the most desperate hour. And you know the worst part of this whole story to me is that he locks eyes with Jesus right after that third denial. And he's just overcome with the bitterness of his regret. And of course, we know what happens next, right? Jesus is condemned at the trial. he's beaten, he's crucified. And so, can you imagine the sorrow that burned on Peter's soul as his closest friend is laid to rest in a tomb? Even after the news comes that Jesus is alive, that he's risen from the dead, Peter still carries the weight of that failure with him. That's great. Jesus is alive, but I ditched him. He's still carrying that, even though he's, I'm sure, glad that Jesus is alive. And we can relate with Peter here, can't we? Can't we relate with him? Sure, our circumstances are different, maybe not as drastic as this, but we know what it's like to feel the sting of regret burning inside of us. We know what that's like. And Peter could have gotten stuck there. He could have gotten stuck in that regret and in that sorry cycle, but Jesus was not going to let him. And so we're going to move to scene number 2 of Peter's story here. We find him out on a lake. He's fishing with the other disciples. Jesus had already risen from the dead. They're out there. They've seen him a couple times. They're out there on the lake. They're fishing. And the Apostle John recognizes the man on the shore. There's a guy there. He had a fire going, and he's like, it's Jesus. Look, there's Jesus. And so Peter jumps out of the boat. Like, he just can't wait for them to row him to the shore. Like, he jumps out of the boat, swims to the shore to go see Jesus. And as Peter approaches, there's that smell of a charcoal fire again. Jesus is there cooking breakfast over a charcoal fire. And, smells have a way of conjuring up memories, don't they? Like when you smell a certain thing, you remember something else. Every time I smell like fresh green beans cooking, I think of my grandma's kitchen, my grandma and grandpa's house. Because I would stay with them during the summer, and we would pick the green beans for them and break them and bring them to her, and she would cook them. And so anytime I smell that, I instantly go back to those summers. Smells conjure up those memories for us, and with the smells, all the emotions that go with it. And so there are only 2 charcoal fires mentioned in Scripture, and Peter's at both of them. The charcoal fire on the night of his denials, and this charcoal fire on the beach. And so as the smell of Peter's betrayal fills the air on that shore, can you just imagine what Peter's thinking as he's walking toward Jesus? Jesus serves him breakfast. He hangs out with him for a little bit, and then it's time for a conversation. And this is what Jesus says to Peter. It says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. And again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. And the third time, he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. And so not once, not twice, but 3 times, Jesus asked the question, do you love me? And 3 times he responds, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And these 3 questions correspond perfectly to his 3 denials just a few days earlier. And so Jesus is doing something in this exchange that helps Peter start over, to get past this regret. He does a couple things here, and I want us to see this because it can help us too. The first thing that Jesus does is that he confirms the relationship with Peter. He confirms that relationship. Implied in Jesus' question, if you put yourself in his shoes, for Jesus to say, do you love me? There's this priceless reassurance for Peter. That Jesus is saying, because I still love you. Do you love me? Because I still love you. And when we know that we're loved, we can find that courage to face regrets. Jesus didn't chastise Peter. He didn't rehash what happened. He didn't make him feel guilty. He didn't blow it off as no big deal, but he didn't give Peter the cold shoulder. He affirms his love for Peter, and he gives him the opportunity to affirm his love back, to reestablish that relationship. So he confirms that relationship with Peter. The second thing that he did with Peter here is he confirms Peter's purpose. He confirms his purpose. After each affirmation of love comes the charge, feed my sheep. So Jesus, who had been calling himself the great shepherd, the good shepherd, commissions Peter to join him in carrying out his mission in the world. By giving Peter a job to do, he's saying, Peter, yeah, you blew it, but you still have a job to do. You still have a purpose to fulfill here. You're not disqualified. I'm not done with you. I need you. And I want you to lead and care for my followers. I think the scene between Jesus and Peter has got to be one of the most spectacular exchanges in Scripture, conversations. I mean, there's just so many layers to this, right? But Jesus refuses to let Peter get stuck in that sorry cycle. He confirms their relationship. He confirms Peter's calling. Now that Peter knows that Jesus has forgiven him and that he still loves him and wants to enlist him into Jesus' mission, Peter can move on. He can move on from his regrets and start over. And here's what we have to understand today as we look at this story and we think about this series is what Jesus did for Peter, he wants to do for you and me. If you're stuck in a regret of action, you need to hear God saying to you, I love you no matter what. Nothing can ever change how I feel about you. If you're stuck in a regret of inaction, you have to hear God saying to you, it's not over. I'm not done with you yet. If you're stuck in a regret of reaction, hear God saying, you are not damaged goods. I have plans and purposes for your life. What Jesus did for Peter, he wants to do for us. He wants to confirm your relationship with him. He wants to confirm your calling. He's not done with you. And he wants today to be the day that you start over. That you start over. What happens so often in life is that we see regret as this finish line, when in fact it's meant to be a starting line. Regret's actually meant to be a helpful thing, right? It's like a functional emotion. It moves us to action to kind of repair things, to patch things up or to fix things. It gives us motivation to do things differently, to make things right. There's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist that has looked at this topic of regret, and she said this. She said, regret doesn't remind us that we did badly. It reminds us that we can do better. And so in that way, we can learn to love our regrets because they can launch us forward into a different future, into a better future. We don't have to get caught up in that cycle. You know, the last thing that Jesus says to Peter in this exchange with him, if you read the story, it's a few verses later, he says, follow me. Now, Jesus had already called Peter 3 years before this, saying, follow me. Remember? He came to James and John and Peter and said, follow me. And he'd already answered that call, and yet Jesus reissues this call to him. This time, he's inviting Peter on a journey to live beyond his regrets. And that's the journey he wants to take you and me on in this series. We will learn how to live beyond our regrets together. Last week, I shared a quote with you as we talked about looking back from Soren Kierkegaard. And he said this, that life can only be understood by looking backwards but it has to be lived forwards. And so as we look backwards in this series, we all have regrets, action, inaction, reaction. But now is the moment. Now is the moment that we can choose to love our regrets, because we know that God promises to love us and use us for His causes, for His will, for His kingdom. He's in the redemption business. He's not done with you or me yet. And so as we close in prayer this morning, I think it's probably a good idea for us to just bow our heads together. So I encourage you to just bow your heads and close your eyes. This is just for you to be able to focus in this moment. I'm not going to do anything weird here or embarrass you in any way. But if you have a regret, big or small, and you want to start over, I want to pray for you this morning. Maybe your regret is relational. Maybe you wish that you had loved better or been loved better. And if your regret is relational, you'd like me to pray for you in this closing prayer, just raise your hand. I'm glad to pray for you. Perhaps your regret is health related. Perhaps you wish you had taken better care of yourself, or you're struggling with the why questions over what's happened to you. If your regret relates to health and you'd like me to pray for you this morning, just raise your hand. I'll pray for you. There's something powerful about raising a hand to say yes. Pray for me. Maybe you're stuck in a financial regret. You wish that you had been smarter about money. You wish you had made different decisions. If your regret is financial and you'd like to be prayed for, would you raise your hand? I'll pray for you. Perhaps your regret relates to your purpose in life. You wish you'd taken a different path. You wish you'd given your life to a bigger cause. If your regret relates to purpose and you'd like to be prayed for, just raise your hand. Maybe your regret is spiritual. You've taken steps that led you away from God. Maybe you just wish you'd thought about God and spiritual things more. If you have a spiritual regret and you want to be included in this closing prayer, just raise your hand. I'll pray for you. Well, whether your regret fits into one of these categories or some other, if today you want to start your journey over in some way, just raise your hand and I'll pray for us as we close. Jesus, we come to you this morning carrying all of our past regrets into this room. Lord, you've seen each hand, each heart, you know each situation. And I pray that you would start a work in each one of us today. May today be the starting line for a new story, a story of life beyond regrets. Lord, I pray for every person here today who wants to start over. I pray that we would hear your still small voice inside of us saying, I love you. I love you. And I pray that we would find courage through our relationship with you to start over. I pray that you would begin to give us a vision for how you want to redeem our regrets. Lord, I know that you have plans and purposes for every person here. So today, may we begin to discover those purposes as we take this next step on this journey with you. Lord, continue to speak to our hearts today, this afternoon, this week, and throughout this series as we say yes to you. Yes, Lord, I want to start over. I want to move ahead. I'm done with the cycle. It's in your name we pray. Amen.